UFC 308 going down in Abu Dhabi over the weekend. In the main event, it was Ilia Topuria, the first knockout victory over Max Holloway of Holloway's career. A stunning knockout in the third round to retain the featherweight championship. And there are a lot of talking points to come out of this particular thing that he did. The first is his brilliance. Let's talk about the actual fight first. First round, Max Holloway has a very clear and obvious understanding of the distance. And I wish that he had a little bit more snap off of that jab, but it was filling the space enough that it was keeping Topuria at least a little bit at distance. And it wasn't like flummoxing Topuria to the point where he wasn't doing anything, but it was keeping him back enough that when Topuria would come in with those charging 1-2 combinations to try to get inside, which I think in MMA is the best way to try to get inside, he was still far enough away that Holloway could, still fill that space a little bit with the jab while circling away and getting away from any kind of danger that he would be in. Topuria did a good job of getting inside a couple of times and landing flush, but for the most part, the elite level boxing for MMA that Max Holloway was able to show in that first round, kept him out of danger for the most part. And I think, I have my notes right here. I'm pretty sure I gave him the first round based off of that. I did. I thought that he won that first round based off of, again, being able to put that volume out there and starting to kind of take over because he had that understanding of the range and the distance and keeping Topuria off of him. The one thing that I have noticed while watching a lot of these fights is sometimes they do follow a bit of a familiar kind of plot line here, where one guy wins an early round because he has figured out the range first. And so he is able to establish that jab, keep him at a distance, and keep him away from it. And I'm not saying that in this case, Holloway just kind of fell into a bit of a false sense of security with that, but there's no real advancement off of that. In Holloway's case, he did advance it a little bit, where he has that jab out there, and he is keeping that distance. And then as Topuria is coming in, the combinations start to get a little bit tighter, and he's starting to follow up that jab with a few more punches, and that's where that volume starts to build. And that was the part of the game for Topuria that I was a little worried about. I wasn't sure how he was going to be able to handle that. And in the first round, it wasn't great. It wasn't bad. He was getting inside. He was landing these shots. Again, I keep feeling like I have to kind of counter everything with, well, it wasn't that bad. Well, it's kind of that bad. Both of these guys fought a tremendous fight. This was art. This fight put the art in mixed martial arts. It was phenomenal stuff to watch. But at the end of that round, you have Holloway, who has the distance down, and he is starting to really tee off on him a little bit. And back to what I was saying before, the common kind of plot line that you see in these is once that guy who was at the wrong end of that distance figures it out and is able to get inside, that guy usually starts to take control of the fight. And that's what we saw in this one. And for a couple of reasons. One was the investment that Topuria made in the leg kicks. He was able to really wear down Max Holloway and slow him down a touch. Not to the extent of Aldo Faber at WEC 48, where Faber's just limping around. It wasn't that level, but it was just enough that it allowed Topuria to start getting inside. And as he starts to get inside, he's landing with that game-changing power that he has, and getting punched in the face that hard also tends to slow you down. And so while Holloway has this otherworldly chin and is starting to put that volume on him a little bit still, it's slowing up a little bit. And now Topuria is getting inside. And now Topuria is getting inside with these 1-2 combinations. And he's really starting to take control of this fight and get that momentum going. I was so impressed with how he was able to kind of counter that. And guys with his knockout power, at his age too, tend to sometimes just go for the one big shot. But he sets it up really well. And then he ends up winning the fight with one big shot. But I guess it was technically two. But still, he is putting those combinations together, and that is allowing him to get inside and to start to control this one a little bit more. And then you get to the third round, where again, that forward pressure, the leg kicks, and now starting to land a little bit. Holloway is just a touch slower than he was at the beginning of this fight. And Topuria is still fresh, and he still has that power, and he is still charging forward and landing with these big shots, and he is able to finally break through, land that big shot. It wobbles Holloway for one of the first times in his career, and then the big left really closes the show, and that is it. Brilliance from every aspect of the sport for Ilia Topuria. He got an early takedown. That kind of got things in Holloway's mind a little bit, and it created a really good kind of grappling exchange there. But what he was able to do, like I said, to start to wear down Max Holloway, to be able to get inside and to land those big shots was a masterclass. And I loved every aspect of it. This was overall a really fun show to watch and to analyze and to break down. And Topuria was at the very top of it with what he was able to do with, again, just some absolute brilliance in game planning, understanding what he was up against, and still being able to walk through some of that fire, because Holloway was putting it on him. This was not a one-sided Terminator walking down ass-kicking by any stretch of the imagination. This was a damn close fight right up until the point where the lights got shut off for Max Holloway. Unbelievable showing. So now you get into the bigger picture of what does this mean. We will start again with Topuria because he is the next one, I think. That this guy has superstar written all over him. Maybe for an English audience there isn't that charisma that some others would like, but he's not boring, for one, and there is a confidence to him that is just it presents a bit of a different, for lack of a better term, because we're going to talk wrestling in a second, for lack of a better term, it presents a different character for the UFC to go out there and promote and put him on there. He is a good-looking dude who has all the confidence in the world, who, by the way, can punch through your face. So that feels like someone you can build around a little bit, right? And so I think that this is a big opportunity now to create one of the bigger stars in the sport, because from a dominance standpoint, he feels like the next one. From a marquee standpoint, I don't know if he is Conor yet. I feel fairly confident that he's not, actually, but he, from a winning MMA fights, it's him and Pereira right now, and there's no one else on their level. And again, if you want to expand and you want to do soccer stadiums and you want to do big European fights, this guy should be at the front line of that, because he has now in 1 year beat Volkanovski and Max Holloway to be your featherweight champion. And I do not think it is way too early to talk about greatest featherweight of all time. You just knocked out the guy who was in third place in that particular battle with Volkanovski and Jose Aldo ahead of him. But another run like this, another few fights, and all of a sudden Topuria is getting into that conversation. That is the level of talent we are talking about with this kid who's only 27 years old. It is unbelievable. And so it creates a very interesting Fighter of the Year discussion, because Pereira has done some phenomenal things. And talent-wise, he is unbelievable. You guys know where I'm at with Alex Pereira. But the year that this kid has had to beat Volkanovski and Holloway. When Volk lost that fight, I had him number 2 pound for pound. Holloway is one of the greatest of all time, coming off of one of the greatest moments of all time at UFC 300, where he video game knockout style Justin Gaethje. And then Topuria came out and knocked him out for the first time ever. It's just like, that's a tough resume to beat when you're looking at Fighter of the Year. Pereira stepped in on short notice and won some big fights. I don't think the caliber of opponent is anywhere close to what Topuria has been able to put out there. In terms of what it means next for Max Holloway, it's a tough spot now for him, because he has now lost fairly soundly to the champion. And the guy who is maybe even next in line, Alex Volkanovski, if he wants another shot, well, Holloway has lost to him thrice. So that sucks. It puts him in a weird area. He is Max Holloway. He is a legend in this game. He has a very aesthetically pleasing style. Sorry, aesthetically pleasing. He's an easy fighter to watch. I love breaking his fights down, and he has a personality that, yeah, you put him out there with anyone, and it's going to be fun. And you can also throw that knockout of Justin Gaethje up on any highlight thing. Is, oh yeah, no, this guy should fight for a title again. So one more fight, like Holloway gets one more win, and he can probably get right back into a rematch here with Topuria, because you can sell that it was a close fight right up until the knockout punch. But I don't know if this will go any differently, because I don't think Topuria is getting worse. And while I don't think Holloway has fallen off to the extent that some of his other MMA brethren have at advanced parts of their career, certainly when they get to 34 fights in their career, he is slowing down maybe just a touch. And if that is all he is slowing down, then it is too much for him to keep up with Topuria. And so then the obvious thing is, well, he just won a big fight at 155 pounds, go there. I wouldn't want to be facing Islam Makhachev, and I don't think an Islam Makhachev fight goes any differently than a fight against Volkanovski would have, or anything like that. So it doesn't, from a title perspective, it doesn't feel like Holloway has room to go up to any of those. So now, where does that conversation leave him? Because he can still put up some amazing fights, and he is still one of the best fighters in the world. And honestly, if at 145 pounds, he's probably the third best fighter, maybe even the second best fighter in the world, depending on where Volkanovski is at right now, post a couple of losses here, and a couple bad losses. And then, so you can argue Holloway was like 2-3 there. And you look over at 155 pounds, you could argue that he is like the second or third best fighter in that division as well. And so he is obviously one of the best fighters in the world, and one of the best fighters ever. It's just now, where do you put him? And I don't really have an easy answer for that. It's kind of just whatever he wants out of this now. Do title fights still motivate him? That is, I think, obviously, I think they did. He showed up motivated and ready to go in this fight. But one of the things he had said is like, yeah, I've never fought Justin Gaethje, and I kind of want to see what that's like. And so, is that going to be something that motivates him continuously? Because I think that's going to have to be what it is for the next little while, is just some of these new tests that you haven't fought or haven't had to pass yet. And now if you get through them, well, now maybe there's this opportunity, maybe there's that opportunity, maybe there's this, whatever. I would love for him to get another Conor McGregor shot, because that happened very early in his career. And I would love for him to get that opportunity to maybe avenge that or something. But I think we are kind of getting into maybe a bit more of a super fight era for Max Holloway. Now, co-main event, Khamzat Chimaev with a dominant performance over Robert Whitaker. And we said coming into the weekend that this was either going to be kind of the end of the Robert Whitaker hype train, the end of the Khamzat Chimaev hype train, or the beginning of the like, okay, this guy is back, here we go. Pretty obvious which one it was. Dominant victory over Robert Whitaker. That guy, no one's touching him. No one's beating that guy. Not at 185 pounds. If he can get down to 170 pounds, ain't nobody at 170 pounds going to stop that guy. If he wants to continue to eat a whole lot and bulk up and get up to 205 pounds, that frame-wise, that might be a little bit difficult for him, but I would still favor him against most there too. This is just genuinely one of the best fighters in the sport. The speed that he is able to execute these things at, the power that he is able to execute some of these things at, and the precision that he is able to have while maintaining the speed and power is just remarkable with what he is able to do. The speed he got in on that takedown was great. And then there's a couple grappling exchanges. He is able to get the better of them, busts up Robert Whitaker's face, gets a crank on that just pushes Whitaker's teeth back into his head a little bit, and that's the end of the fight. I know we just did like a big long breakdown of the Topuria thing. I don't think there's a big long breakdown to be had here. This is a terrifying fighter when he is motivated and when he is on. And right now, he seems like he is both of those things. And I just, like, a title has to be next for him against Dricus du Plessis. And we can talk about, oh, wow, isn't it funky that Dricus can do all these different things and all of that? It's not going to matter because Khamzat is just going to run through him, I think. Like, this is just a different animal. And the only thing that has been holding this guy back is him. And the fact that he is able to do this in this big of a stage really shows what this guy is really what this guy can do when he is really motivated. And he put on, I thought, a good performance. For Robert Whitaker, it's another tough one. And it is, I think, going to pile on a thought that maybe his best days are behind him, because they are. But where can he go now in this weight class? Because he has now lost to the top 3 fighters in the division with Izzy, Dricus, and now Khamzat. So any hope of a championship opportunity for him, I think, is gone. I would imagine that getting your face fixed is going to require a little bit of time off. And I hope that the run that Whitaker had, kind of pre-Izzy, that kind of bridging that gap there at 185 pounds, doesn't get lost. Because again, genuinely one of the better fighters of his era. He has now just run into a couple of buzzsaws here, and I don't think another title opportunity is in his future. Again, very talented fighter and is a good test for other fighters to see where they are in the championship hierarchy, but that's basically what is left, I think, for Robert Whitaker at this point. Magomed Ankalaev with a really big win, and a very fascinating one, at 205 pounds. And you would have to assume now that he is the next in line for a championship opportunity here at 205 pounds, beating Aleksandar Rakic by unanimous decision. The first round, Ankalaev looked a little bit set off a little bit. He obviously has power, and the striking is okay. He ended up just kind of chasing a whole lot in that round, and Rakic used a very kick-heavy game plan because the reach, I have it here, the reach was about the same. No, Rakic had a 3-inch reach advantage. But anytime that Rakic would try to punch, that allowed Ankalaev to get in and land a couple of big shots. Rakic was using a kick-heavy strategy, and not just leg kicks, because that, just the way you do it, leaves you a little bit more open and exposed, but he was going to the head and he was going to the body, and that was forcing Ankalaev to, defend with his left hand to get that kind of kicked up a little bit and beat up, but also just kind of kept him at a distance, and he wasn't, again, what we talked about in the Holloway Topuria fight, he wasn't able to really get inside a whole lot, until, again, he was. And what changed in the second round is he started to cut those angles off a little bit more effectively. And that really started to kind of cut off the game plan for Rakic. And that allowed Ankalaev to not only kind of dictate how this fight was going to go, but also to get a little bit more inside and start to land his power shots as well. Instead of just chasing around and whatever, now you have cut them off and now you're in the advantageous position and now you can land with a couple of your shots. And so I thought that really allowed him to get into his groove. And it was at that point where it seemed like Rakic couldn't really get Ankalaev off of him. And this is where I think the fight really took a turn. And sometimes MMA coaching can be talked about a little bit too much. I don't think that is the case here. I think there was and to be fair, I don't know Rakic the way his coaches do. And so maybe if they come out there and throw water in his face and are like, yo, dipshit, you just lost that round. What are you doing? Why are we not? You had a winning strategy in round 1. Why can't you get this in round 2? What are we doing here? You just lost that round. It's now 1-1. We got to win this round if we're going to win this fight and get back into title contention. And maybe Rakic is the type who just does not handle that style of coaching well. Either it demoralizes him or over-motivates him and puts him in a bad position, whatever it may be. Maybe he doesn't handle that coaching well. But for that corner to come out and say, yo, guy, it's 2-zip, dog. You got this thing. I thought was a real strategic error because Rakic then fought that third round like he was winning. And he got these tie-ups along the wall, and it was just kind of slowing this pace down. And while all that's happening, Ankalaev is landing some of these little shots, and he's able to get these things going. And then when they break, all of a sudden, you have Ankalaev landing with some more power, landing with a few more of these shots. And it's like, for Rakic, it's okay, well, they're not knocking me out. I'm up 2-1. We're going to win this fight. And then they go to the judges' scorecards, and it's 29-28. So I thought a real strategic error from the side of Rakic in this fight that kind of set them back and may have cost them the win, quite frankly. If he comes out with a good game plan in that third round and really executes, I think he could win that fight. But it kind of took it into the world where Ankalaev was a bit more comfortable and was able to get him the win. So now it does set up a fight for Ankalaev with Pereira. A couple of things from this, though. They were saying on the broadcast, and he kind of was like, no, I just didn't think Rakic's stand-up was all that good. So we were able to come up with a game plan, figure it out, and go from there. And for the most part, that is accurate. The first round didn't go Ankalaev's way, although with some of the big shots he was able to land, you can certainly make a compelling case depending on what you want based off of octagon control where he was coming forward the most and landed the most big shots. It was only a couple of big shots, and it was whilst he was eating a whole lot of kicks and a few punches as well. So there's a volume power debate to be had, but I gave Rakic 1-1. You can certainly make the case that Ankalaev had that first round, but still it's not debilitating to the point where it would take you off of the striking first game plan if you're Ankalaev. And as we said, all he had to do was start cutting that cage off, and then he found his advantage. So I don't want to say it was an easy fight for him, but it was an easier fight for him to be able to go out and do that instead of doing the grinding thing on the ground. But, and this is maybe, again, the pro wrestling coming out in me a little bit. If you wanted to really make a case that Ankalaev is a real danger to Alex Pereira, the way you were going to do that was to go out and just wrestling suplex the bejesus out of this guy and just grab him and take down and grind on him in submission attempt after submission and just seem like this boa constrictor just slowly dragging the life out of your opponent. And the fact that he didn't, it won him the fight. But I think all he did in this was demonstrate for about 15 minutes that his striking is not close to the level of Alex Pereira. And so if you wanted to create this dangerous challenge, the likes of which Pereira has never felt before, and start to sell this thing, this was not the way to do it. It was the way to get the win, and you can then sell the rest of that later. And I'm sure in any highlight pack, whatever, when it comes to creating doubt about who can win, you will see Ankalaev slamming guys and the strong grappling. And maybe this gave you a little bit more promo material to work with. These guys will stand and bang, and those sorts of things. But from a strictly tactical, this guy can give Pereira a problem, I saw nothing for 15 minutes that I thought Alex Pereira couldn't handle anyway. So I thought that was just, if that was again, he is looking to win a fight, and he won the fight. And I don't want to take away and say, oh, well, he should have done it with more flair, because I hate that. And I know I just kind of became that guy, but if you are just looking at we are creating the next dangerous challenger for Alex Pereira, that was not the way to do it. And then in the thing, stop running away from me, Alex. Look, I understand that this guy is the number one contender, and he is the number one contender for a champion who is looking everywhere but his weight class right now. He is looking at Aspinall, he's looking at John Jones, and I'm sure if Israel Adesanya decided that he wanted to bulk up to 205 pounds, that front of the line, at least in Pereira's mind, that would be the fight to make. So yeah, the top three options for Pereira aren't Ankalaev. I don't think anyone, aside from the Ankalaev camp, is taking that as, oh, Pereira's running from him. It's like, no, man, this guy has just whooped that ass in every other top contender in this division, and he is now looking at bigger and greater things. He's not looking at, like, oh, yeah, Anderson Silva, I want you. Or, he's not calling out these legends who are past their prime or anything like that. He's calling out the interim heavyweight champion of the world who hasn't seen the second minute of a fight in, 24 months. And he's calling out John Jones, who, if you just looked at his resume, is the greatest fighter in the history of the sport. If you just watch his fights, he's the greatest fighter in the history of the sport. So he's not exactly calling out these whatevers. Ankalaev, compared to those guys, is a tune-up fight, with all due respect. So the narrative that, oh, this guy's ducking me, he's running from me, that can work in some instances. It ain't this one, man. No one believes that guy is afraid of anybody right now. Won't go as deep into these next couple, but a really fun chess match in the featherweight division with Lerone Murphy against Dan Ige. And again, this was a very fascinating fight to watch, because early on, we know what Lerone Murphy wants to do. He wants to come out, wants to use that smooth striking that he's got and start to style on Dan Ige a little bit. Well, Dan Ige didn't let him do that. He was up in that guy's face for the entirety of the first 5 minutes, really putting that pressure on and just not letting Murphy get comfortable at all. And then he sets up, he gets the takedown, and we get a couple interesting grappling exchanges, but for the most part, it is just Murphy trying to not get bludgeoned to death while he is on the ground. And that's oversimplifying it a little bit. Murphy had a couple threatening moments there, but still, Ige was able to keep that pressure on for 5 minutes. Then, that pressure slowed down mightily. And so I don't know if it was a cardio thing or what it was, but all of a sudden Ige was not putting that pressure on Murphy, and that allowed Murphy to get back into this fight. And so when he's not on that back foot, now he can start coming forward and start landing a few more of those strikes and really start to get those things going. And for Ige, you can see he's starting to slow down because it's a long shot that he tries that he doesn't really set up. And you can then make a counterpoint that maybe Murphy shouldn't have had as much trouble getting away from it as he did, but still, there was that pressure that was coming after him, and that pressure that was really bothering him in round one, that wasn't there in round two. Ige was, I think, trying to put it up there. He just didn't have it in the gas tank for whatever reason, and that allowed Murphy to get back into this fight. And so in the third round, they're going at Ige like, look, man, you gotta pressure this guy, everything you got. And so what they got instead was a tired fighter who was still trying to push forward that just ultimately made him a little bit vulnerable. And then an interesting tactical move by Murphy, because I thought this was set up, not that it was just like strict zombie, like he's just dragging his knuckles, okay, fine, whatever, like leading chin forward, like he's still covering up, he's still landing his shots, but this is not the forward pressure that you were dealing with before. This shouldn't have been much of a hindrance to deal with if you are the type of striker that we think that you are. And instead he goes for the takedown, which I thought was interesting, and it led to some sloppy grappling exchanges, but also very interesting and I think noteworthy ones, where you have Ige, who is this veteran, who is trying to take advantage of a world that he is a little bit more comfortable with in the grappling department and trying to get every edge that he can in there. And you have Murphy, who I think is trying to show that he's more than just a one-trick pony, going in there and throwing up submission attempts as well. And it led to some very interesting grappling exchanges that probably at the end of it you come out 50-50, if not maybe a little bit more threatening for Murphy, actually. Throws up the triangle attempt, had a potential at a heel hook that turned into a scramble that it was like, oh, Ige used this to get on top, and actually then Murphy got back on top again and created that opportunity. So I thought a very interesting fight, and one that is, I think, very necessary for Murphy in his continued progression up at 145 pounds. And for Ige, I think the game plan was very telling, and I think the game plan is also one that other guys are going to try to implement now on Lerone Murphy going forward, because I do think that it exposed a bit of a weakness. And so this is exactly what you want when you have a guy on the rise. And they are both 33 years old, so it's not like you have this young up-and-comer whatever. Ige has just been around it here in the UFC for a little bit more and has a better understanding of these high-level fights than Murphy has. And so this is the test you want to see this guy pass on his way up. How does he handle forward pressure? How does he handle when both guys are bagged? It's the third round and they're in these wild grappling exchanges. How does he handle this? And overall, it's a B to B plus. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't, okay, this guy is ready for prime time. Here we go. But this was a necessary step for Murphy to pass on his way, continuing up in the top 15. And for Ige, I think it was a good game plan. I do think he just kind of ran out of gas a little bit, and maybe that there was a 75% area in there that you can go with, but still one of the better fighters you will see. And then Shara Bullet Magomedov with the gigantic knockout win to start the night on pay-per-view as he spins one way and then the other way to knock a dude's head off and pick up a victory in that fight. I had seen the highlight before I watched this fight. I didn't realize it was so late in the second round when I saw the highlight the first time. This was a pretty evenly fought contest until that point. Both guys were throwing with very good power. Both guys were countering pretty well, and both guys seemed to have a fairly strong grasp on the kickboxing aspect of mixed martial arts. That's basically what this comes down to, is that they felt fairly evenly matched on the feet a little bit, and then, Shara started pulling ahead a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and then he lands that big ba-boom, and that's that. And so a guy who has been drawing a lot of attention isn't going to get less of it. That was quite the performance and a really great showing for him. And it is still not one where I'm saying rush this guy into the top 15 or anything like that. It was an awkward post-fight, whatever. He's calling out Israel Adesanya. I think Israel Adesanya gives this guy a lot of fits. I think what we saw in this is that he is ready to stand in there and ready to bang and ready to go. He is technically pretty sound, I think, in the striking. But if he has someone who is kind of his equal in that sense, which I would put Izzy above him, then I think that is going to give him a few fits, and we will see. But it's still, he is an action fighter. He has obviously a very unique look, and it has a lot of people's attention. And so I think that's something the UFC is going to continue to build on. For Petrosian, it's a tough loss. Against a big name opponent. I don't think you cut him after this or anything like that. I don't know how many marquee fights we're going to see from this guy in the next little bit before he works his way back up, but there's something there when it comes to the striking element for him. So that is UFC 308 recap.